Hi guys. Before we proceed to this video, we've got something very important to share with you. Neoliberalism, Inequality and Authoritarianism by Professor Jon V. Kofas is available for purchase. You can order it directly from the publisher Little French eBooks or through Amazon.
The story of Jeffrey Epstein, an American billionaire and, of course, convicted sex offender and sex trafficker, has made world headlines in the last 2 months. This is mid-February 2026. This is a story that begins in the 1980s with Jeffrey Epstein marking a career in high finance. Before that, he tried his luck as a teacher, although he did not have the credentials for the position, and was dismissed, allegedly, because of the interest he had shown in underage girls, in other words, in teenagers, the very students he was teaching. He entered the world of high finance on Wall Street and hooked up with clients offering advice on investments and tax, presumably tax avoidance, tax evasion. In any event, the Epstein story has many tentacles. It is not, above all, a tabloid story, as some right-wing publications around the world, actually, not just in the United States where all of this happened, have presented it in order to dismiss it as something that isn't that significant. It has many tentacles that go beyond the crimes of sex with minors, not just by Epstein, but by the elite, what I call the Caligula elite in the Epstein circle. And I invite you, by the way, to take a look at the longer analytical video where I delve into more details on this issue. The Epstein story is about the decadence, the corruption, the criminality of the Caligula elite. And the Caligula elite transcends political boundaries, political parties. It transcends politics. It goes to the heart of the hegemonic culture in the Western world, which is interesting because what we have here is a hegemonic culture that molded Jeffrey Epstein during the Reagan decade, when the neoliberal political model was molded, and it created a value system which is basically one that commodifies everything, including human beings, exploits them without any moral consideration or any consideration regarding social justice, and it views society essentially as an entity to be exploited. So all of this, the so-called Caligula culture and the elites in that circle, many of them directly and indirectly, as we see from the United States and Europe, other parts of the world, including Israel, who were involved in activities that were exploitative, illegal, and criminal. Even worse, however, is the fact that it took years from the time that charges were first brought against Jeffrey Epstein in the state of Florida in 2005. This is 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, until he was brought to justice And even then, the government of the United States, the Department of Justice, under both Democrats and Republicans, resisted any attempt to basically bring out all of the facts, declassify all the data, all the emails, all the documents in its possessions, and there are millions, by the way, of these, regarding who was connected. And the reason for this is very simple. The Epstein Caligula culture is about, and it is a reflection of, the hegemonic culture of the Western world, and especially the United States, and the reluctance to expose billionaires, millionaires, high-ranking politicians, including presidents like Trump and Clinton, as well as celebrities, famous people, Hollywood personalities, and so forth. The reluctance to expose the elite, which was essentially, according to the Epstein Files, had been living a life above and outside the law that pertains to the rest of society, was deliberate. The idea that such a Caligula culture elite is the one in charge, presenting itself as the guardian of the law and virtue to the rest of society, while they are above the same legal standard, above the same values as everyone else, was very dangerous for everyone to expose. Not to mention individuals and companies involved not just in underage, having sex with underage girls, and trafficking, but also involved in everything from money laundering and tax evasion and other illegal schemes. As we'll see in the longer video, the fact is millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars have been paid in to settle both with government and private individuals in this case, including institutions like banks. Some of the largest banks in the Western world were involved with the Caligula elite. They were involved to the tune of hundreds of millions. They facilitated the financial sector. Wall Street facilitated all of this. Some of these people were also involved, Epstein himself, in international intrigue with the intelligence of Israel, for example. So there is a lot here about which scholars for the next 40 to 50 years will be unraveling, because there are so many dimensions to the Epstein story. It is not just about individuals going to the private island of this convicted sex offender and billionaire and having these parties with underage girls. It's not just about that. It is about much more. It is about how they used the government, the state, whether in England, in France, and especially in the United States, to secure corporate subsidies, to secure tax breaks, tax exemptions for certain companies, and for individuals, by the way. It is about the privileged classes, though we are back in the 18th century, when the aristocracy and the upper clergy were above the law, and then there was the third estate, the 97% of the population, everyone else. This is the situation we're in today under the neoliberal model. The neoliberal model, in its demise, and the United States in its decline, yielding to China in economic status on a world scale, is showing a great deal of the corruption and the self-destruction from within, and the uh, Epstein story is an integral part of that. Now, I want to caution that the fact is that both political parties, especially the Democratic Party, it has been trying to use this story as leverage for the 2026 congressional and elections and local elections, state and local elections, against the Republicans. But this is not a Republican or Democratic story. This is a bipartisan story. There were, in fact, some, very few, but some progressives. There were universities involved in this. There were prominent academics involved in this. Obviously, I mentioned Hollywood personalities. This is about the elite Caligula culture. And by this, I mean a decadent, corrupt culture that is the byproduct of the neoliberal economy in the last 45 years. That's when Epstein lived. That's when all of this took place. This is not the story about one person or his partner, Miss Maxwell. This is a story that is about a structure, about a social contract that impacts that is burdensome and impacts negatively the common population, the working class and the middle class. Epstein himself, by the way, came from very modest family in New York City, from a working class family, and manipulated the system, and through various mechanisms getting into high finance in the age of deregulation and government looking the other way, and using basically sex and money, if you will, high finance and sex trafficking and so forth. This is how he rose to power and created an international circle of power and made himself indispensable. And I will make references, of course, in the longer video to stories in organizations like the New York Times that have been published by the New York Times, Sky News, and a few others, that actually it was also a scheme by Epstein that involved blackmail, but that is just another dimension of looking at the far-reaching impact of this. What we have here is a symptom of a decadent social contract, a social contract of neoliberalism that is facing demise, along with at the same time as the United States itself is facing decline and constantly using two weapons. One, its vast defense sector on a world scale and militarization and the military solution for everything. And the second, of course, weaponizing trade and the currency, namely the hard currency, the dollar, against friend and foe alike. So the story here is indeed about the decadence of the neoliberal hegemonic culture, and as I call it, and as we'll see in the longer video, the Caligula elite culture around Epstein, which of course has now been revealed to have many, many facets to it, and many people previously not even suspected would be involved have been involved. I invite you to take a look at that. I invite you to write comments, ask questions, and by all means, join this channel. Thank you very much.